podcast. It's just a podcast interviewing different people in technical programming fields to be able to learn from their experience and life story. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Frank Ayars. So how about we just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a programmer. Been a programmer for a long time, since probably about 1996 professionally. So it's been a long time. I think more than being a programmer, I'm a husband and a father of many children, 11 kids. Some of those kids you know, and some you may not know at this point. But yeah, I got in. I actually didn't start out as a programmer. I was, and we could get into that a little bit later. There's a little bit more story there, but I was a biology major. I have a biology degree, and in the course of me getting my biology degree, I was introduced to computer programming, and it lit a fire. And so and I'll talk more about the specifics of what kind of programming that kind of lit my fire. But it has not stopped. So I love programming. I love create. I think it's the reason why I love I don't like programming. Maybe like some people like say somebody who's developing a language, that's working down at the compiler level loves it. I love it because I can create applications and create things, kind of like almost like creating worlds. And so I love it, and it's really not gone down. It almost became a bit of an addiction because it's almost like, it's not almost, it's like building cars, somebody enjoys building a car, or, as a hobby, any other kind of hobby that they like to enjoy, especially on the creative type of hobby. So it became that for me, and I get to do it as my job. And sometimes, I get to do it as a kind of my side thing too that I enjoy. So that kind of sums up my kind of my programming side of things, where I'm at as far as love of it, and kind of what I do for a living mainly. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the side things too that I do there that I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I mean, you kind of hinted at it, but let's just kind of start there. What was that kind of first experience that kind of got you hooked?
Yeah. So that story, it actually goes back, starts in, first grade. I won't go through every year of my development in that. Actually, there's a big gap there, so that works out time-wise. So in first grade, actually, believe it or not, Apple IIe systems, they came. I went to a school in Corona, California called Vicentia, and they started taking us, I think once a week. I can't remember the interval, but it was something like once a week. We got to go to the library where they had these computers, and we got to learn a little bit about computers. And even at that point, it's kind of, the story will jump to like my college age, like I mentioned, when I was getting my biology degree. But literally between first grade, somewhere first grade, second grade, and between college, I didn't do any programming. But in first grade on those Apple IIe systems, which took these big old 3.5, floppy disks, and that's how they ran off those floppy disks. You could run BASIC. There was a computer language called BASIC on there. And when I went into the computer class, all I liked to do was write these little basic programs, like, what's your favorite color? Red. If somebody typed in red, it would say something back to them like, oh, the color red is horrible. And I love that. I got a big kick out of that. I remember very distinctly liking that a lot. And when you're a kid, and even almost into your adulthood, you think everything you like, somebody else must like too. Everybody else must love this. And you didn't realize till later that that's probably not the case. Like, I liked it, and if I probably looked around, I noticed other kids didn't. They were playing Oregon Trail and playing some games that we had on those Apple IIes at the time. But I wanted to program. I wanted to make these little programs. And the idea that you could actually get this computer to do something you commanded it to do, and to have some type of interaction with people, especially, that was very interesting to me. So that's first grade, somewhat maybe into second grade. And then they didn't have the computer class, or I don't know what happened, but I would ask my mom all the time, could you get me a computer? She's like, well, I'll try. And I always wanted one, but just through it wasn't easy, for the income of our family at that time. It's a little easier to get computers nowadays, but back then when the personal computer was just starting up, it was extremely difficult. So all the time went by. Didn't really think about it over time very much. But then I'm staying in college. I'm actually renting a room out of a house with a couple of other college guys, and one of the guys that I was rooming with there actually was his mom's house, Peter McGowan. His cousin was over doing. First of all, Peter McGowan. He's in college and he's got this business. He's got a business now. You may have heard of it, Storyland Studios. If somebody's listening to this podcast, they can look it up. He's actually very successful. But at that time, he was a college kid starting all these business. One of the businesses he had was installing networks and computers and actually doing programs. He wasn't writing them, but his cousin Long was writing programs. In fact, the company that he was where the story is leading to is I came into one of the rooms where Long was coding at the house where we were staying. He didn't live there, but Peter's cousin was staying there to help out writing this program for this company called Western Golf out in Palm Desert. They might still exist today, I don't know. But he was writing a program, an inventory system for them, and I was watching him program, like, I want to do that. Like, show me how to do that. And he was very busy. They were just, schedules and everything. And he said, well, here's some information to go study this. And Pete had some computers laying around, so I started programming. Well, Pete then said, hey, if you like the programming, start working on these. I've got some people who need some programming. In fact, the first program, actually, I don't know, it's one of these. The first program I ever wrote for somebody to make money was either, I don't remember the order, but there was Fleetwood that was here in Riverside, actually had an operation here that's since moved, but they also had some programming going on. They had some inventory needs. And so a guy named Gary Pace there, I got introduced to him and started doing some programs for them, and it worked out really well. And I was excited, and he was getting what he wanted. And then there was another job that actually took me all-nighters all summer. Can't even do an all-nighter now, but all-nighters through the summer, writing this program for a company called Leak Detection. Or they have many leak detections, but this was one unit down in Escondido, and it was a large one. So kind of their inventory scheduling. And so got to write that. And that was just, I loved it. This is what I want to do. I pretty much got my biology degree. I think after that summer, I can't remember the order there either, but got my degree in biology, went into teaching, didn't know what I wanted to do went into school thinking I was going to be a doctor, and then realized, hey, I don't really want to be in school. Now things have changed since then. I would love to have, everybody looks back in retrospect and says, hey, I could have spent more time in school here. Here's the way I could have used school. At that time, I didn't have that notion. And I was like, well, I like teaching. At that time, I was in youth ministry, helping out as a leader. It was about 6 years. I kind of helped out at Crossroads Christian Church in Corona. Loved being around kids, loved, being a part of Bible studies, and just thought, well, I can teach, and I like the sciences, so I went in and did that. But my second year teaching, I said, well, I'm programming. I like programming. I'm going to find out. And at that time, actually, believe it or not. So I don't know what you think. I know you're young, but as you look at the landscape, don't know if you look at programming or software engineering or, software development, whatever you want to call that, if that's a lucrative career or not, if that's a career you want to go for. At that time, I didn't know. I didn't know really what was in it. I knew we were getting paid for these jobs, but the amount, and I remember asking some people like, hey, you think I can make as much as a teacher, at software engineering? And teachers in the whole can make quite a bit, especially when you take the whole package in. But I didn't quite realize it was a little more lucrative than teaching. So I didn't go for it for the money. I thought at that time it wasn't going to make very much money, but did it because I loved it. And I found a job at this this place called, it was the first interview I had. I took the first full-time job I could take. It was called Details Incorporated. They did printed circuit boards. And I helped write the program that would end up, they call these things travelers, where as the circuit board gets its development through the shop, they have a traveler that goes with it that kind of makes sure that all the information is being collected on what's happening with it. So that was my first job, and that kind of started my career. And from there, so I didn't have any formal background in computer programming, but because of that, that start I had, I caught the fire, and I just started getting any information I possibly could. Got books, algorithm books. Just when internet was, I know the internet is just around now, but at that time it was just kind of forming into itself. It was really just a small little thing that you could go look up bands and little bits of information here and there, kind of thing. eBay was just starting to form, and Amazon, I don't even know if it was around, but you could start collecting information on the internet, a lot of it. And I could talk about the details there, but what comes to mind at that point is I was really, besides doing all this inventory kind of business type of programming, business information type of programming, information systems, I really loved the graphical programming side of things. So graphics programming. So I got into C++ and I really got into DirectX at that time, pulling down all the stuff Microsoft was giving for DirectX. So there was the information side of programming, there was the graphics side of programming, just taking it in, and didn't know really where I wanted to go in the end with it all, but I knew I loved it, and that was kind of the start of that adventure, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I mean, you are kind of already mentioned of you were really just trying to grab anything that you can get, but I think that, and this is kind of a central message for everybody, but I mean, you just loved it, and I think that's kind of the central drive that people should have throughout it.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting to me because, and this may come through the conversation, but I've noticed, and this is for anything, computer programming or anything that anybody does, is there doesn't have to be a passion, like a burning obsession passion. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. But something like computer programming, I think you have to have a level of at least have to like it. Because believe it or not, I've seen people who don't, they just weren't built for it. Everybody's kind of has their talent. And so it's not to say that they're not good altogether or anything. It's just they weren't in the right place. And if you don't like it, it's just a burden. And it's hard to sit there 8+ hours a day looking at a computer, trying to solve these problems or this information. And sometimes it's a lot. Even the simple things sometimes have such nuances to them that you have to like it a lot or you have to like it at least. But it's better if you like it a lot, so that it's not just, I have to do this, but I want to do this. And you spend the time and you enjoy that. There's a satisfaction, on each step of the day that you're dealing with this.
Yeah. And so in that time, I mean, like at this point, you have your first job. How old were you whenever you got that job, and how long did you have that?
Yeah, so I graduated, I want to say 22 years old. I was taught for 2 years, so I'm going to say it's probably 1996-ish. I think that's right. I was about 24 years old when I started doing it professionally. Maybe 23, 22 if you want to, or I guess 21, 22 if you want to consider the work I did for Fleetwood and American Leak Detection.
Okay, yeah.
So before that, no, a lot of kids now are programming, at like 5 and 6 years old. They're getting right into it.
Yep. So in that experience, I mean, you pretty much just jumped straight on into the professional field with a lot of that. I mean, like you said, a lot of kids and stuff are just programming, messing around with stuff for years before they get into professional stuff. But how prepared did you kind of feel jumping into that and making things for somebody that they were paying you for it?
Yeah, that's interesting you asked that, because I may not be, I only know my own mind. and my own view of things. And one thing it was a very distinct contrast in my mind about who I thought I was growing up and going into the software. It was not like I was a 15-year-old at some point or an 18-year-old who thought, I'm going to go and be a software engineer. I thought that's just something else. That's a doctor. That's a nuclear scientist or something. There were just these things that it wasn't me. And so there was a lot of like insecurity in it, actually. Like I remember actually Gary Pace specifically, he said something to me, or he said a few things, and I can't say specifically. He was the guy at Fleetwood. But I'm doing these programs for him. I'm feeling very actually insecure about it. I'm liking it. I'm happy I'm doing it. But I'm like, ugh, when he sees my stuff compared to, the guys, because actually he ran a software team or something like that. Like whether he ran the software team, he had guys under him that were seasoned developers, men. I feel like a boy, and he had these men working for him and women, and so I thought, and the reason why he had us is they were all taxed out. They just needed some stuff. He had some needs, and he thought I somehow he got connected with Peter and came to me. And so here I am, and I'm thinking, oh man, it's going to be really, humiliating, And he's like, hey, I really like your stuff. He said some things to that effect, and kept, I really like working with you, those type of things. I'm like, yes, that was huge. That was a big, because I was really insecure about it. I really wanted to do it, but really felt a little bit not like it was me. And I don't know when it started feeling like it was. Now I feel like it's my fiber. That's who I am. I could talk about it. I feel no insecurity there or anything. I feel very confident about it. But back then I felt very insecure about it. And some nice words from Gary Pace were really good. I would say actually what he said to me, I think it was at that point where I said, I transitioned from, this idea of being a teacher or whatever it was. Sorry, it's nebulous on how it went, but I do specifically remember that I now want to go into computer programming based on some of the things he said.
Yeah. That like encouragement and those good words from him kind of leading you on. Yeah. That's awesome. So going from that job, what was it kind of like working in that full-time atmosphere of as far as like learning and growing and continuing in that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, and this may sound offensive to teachers, I don't know, I would say my fiber was not teaching in the end, but I remember because I was a teacher for 2 years in junior high, and a lot of that is a behavioral management of, and first was a private school, next was a public school, and both were difficult on me because I just, I'm a kid at that point trying to make these keep these kids, well behaved and doing their work and on task and all that. And so when I went into programming, I remember thinking, oh, this is not, it felt like I was in these rough waters, and now I'm like sailing smooth. And I found that I really enjoyed, where I was very unconfident about who I was going into this. Like there was going to be these really smart people that, I just would be very unkind to me, not be open. And I found some of those people along the way, very few. And I would say most people were very collaborative, very willing to share information, very willing to mentor as necessary. So I like that. I felt, so little by little, I don't know how many years or what the progression was, but it really smoothed out well and felt like there was no point where I felt that there was some resistance. Like, is this the right place for me? It was like, this is the right place for me. And it kind of just kept moving that way. Yeah. Through the entire career.
Yeah, that's great. So going from that job, where did you kind of go from there? Cause you're not working there now. What did you go from there?
Yes. So I went started at the printed circuit board place. And actually I met one of my best friends there, Martin Perez, who's like, I think he's, second to the CIO of Riverside County right now. He's more of a manager, but he was a programmer at that time. Great guy. And he's got a great story. He's a great person to maybe interview. He started out working at an orange packing house, I think in Riverside, maybe Corona. And he got into doing their inventory system there and helping out with that programming, and became a really good programmer, and then lands at Details. Same time I'm there, we become good friends. He goes to the county of San Bernardino, says, hey, if you ever want to come over to the county of San Bernardino, it's a great place to work. I said, okay, I'm coming over at some point. And I went over there and really got in. Now I feel like it was definitely more of a professional job, even more than the Details job, as far as this, where they were a printed circuit board shop, and I was kind of, doing their secondary kind of work, to help with their printed circuit board stuff. Now I'm working at the ISD department of County of San Bernardino, where their objective is to write software, and to do information technology type things. From there, so I mentioned that I was really into graphics programming, and I was getting into C++. So at Visual Basic is where I started with Details. County of San Bernardino was Visual Basic, but I really love C++. I was getting into that and I wanted to go sharpen the C++ skills. So I went out and looked for a job that can do C++ and found a job in Orange County. Didn't know about the commute, much about it. Didn't realize what I was getting into for those maybe listening that aren't from California. There's like Orange County and LA and these metros that are around here. And then there's suburbs. And many of the suburbs are like 30 miles away, like Corona is to, say, Orange County, 60 miles from LA. So, and we have one of the worst commutes in the world. You get in a car at 5 a.m. in the morning, between 5 and 8, 9 a.m., you're going to be stuck for about an hour or two to get to your job. So I went out to Orange County, got a job at this place called Windfire. And this was about about a year after I got the job there's a thing called the dot bomb. Don't know if you ever heard of it. It was like the year 2000. And actually, I don't know if it was 2000, 2001. You can look it up. But there was a judgment that went against Microsoft. And that seemed to me at the time, somebody can say that this wasn't it, but it seems to me at that time that was the one thing that kind of shuttered iced the technology websites were really becoming very popular then. Like at the Super Bowl, you'd see all these website commercials. Like if you had a website, it was awesome. So, but there's all this momentum going to technology, and it became really inflated in like the year 2000, 2001 maybe. There was this judgment on Microsoft about its monopoly or something on its operating system in the browser, and that, I think, iced the market, and it just dropped. The technology sector just kind of hit a wall at that point. And so our business went out of business. I kind of floundered around a little while, and then I went to work for this company called FileNet. And that was that was C++ at that time, and they were a content management system. They're still around as part of IBM. And so in 2006, while I'm working there, so from 2001, I worked there from 2001 to 2009. 2006, IBM purchases them. So then I worked from 2006 to like 2009 as an IBM employee and learned a lot. So FileNet was really like a well-greased machine as far as software management, software development, business sales, all that kind of stuff. So really got a good education there. And then IBM comes in 2006, and they're just, they've got it honed as far as, processes and things like that. And then that's also another thing, though, is where now you're in the software world, and it's like IBM's kind of command and control. They have a way of doing things, and you do it that way. And there's some latitude there. I don't want to make it sound like you've gone to the dark side or something like that, but it's now you're kind of, and where I was at least, I kind of felt like I'm doing this one thing now. And all along I have this on the side, I have this real creative drive to like build video games and just simulations. and things like that. So, and the other thing that's coming in at that point, besides my passion to do something a little more creative than what I'm doing there at IBM, is my family's growing, and I always had this kind of I don't know what you call it, like monkey on the back, because I wouldn't call it a monkey on the back because it was a good thing. It was like, this isn't right commuting out. I leave at like 5 a.m. in the morning to start everything, get to my job at like 7 a.m. or whatever we were getting there. We did variations on this, but say we left at 6 a.m. even it's dark, nobody's really up, and then I get home at like 6 p.m. and sometimes that's dark. So it was like dark to dark, and my family's growing. My wife is totally burdened by just all the things that come with having children and the day. And so I'm like, I should be here. I don't like this idea of dad just going away, being at his job and then coming home for a couple hours, putting the kids to bed, maybe doing some stuff on the weekends. And so that didn't feel right to me. And so I'm like, I want to do my own business, something that I can bring home. At that time, telecommuting was not so favorable, and it was kind of hard to do actually until like 2006 and beyond. So it wasn't like something, it wasn't kind of an option, to do that full time. But I wanted something too that my kids could be involved with as well. So in 2009, I left IBM to actually go do this site called affectme.com. I did a whole business plan on it. And the idea is that I would have this website and some processing things where we could people would upload their videos, and then we would take them and apply special effects to them. And we had all these samples. I took my kids like Wyatt and Emma at that time, and Colson, I don't know, maybe even Annie. And we made all these little sample videos where I would take them out, put like lightsabers, and then and with sticks, and then we would apply the lightsaber effect to it. And the idea is we would upload these videos, apply the effects, and then send them back to them, and they pay like $20 an upload or something like that. So I started that, made no money on it. And in the meantime, as I knew that it was a risky idea on that, to do that. I couldn't see the full end game on that one. So I was seeking some counsel from different people. So one of the people Peter McGowan, who was the guy that originally got me into programming through his little business, and his cousin Long, I was talking to him, and he said, my kids, 2006, I think, is when the iPhone came out. I could be wrong on that. But at that point, he's like, hey, my kids love playing games on the iPhone. Why don't you do something like, and I want to do something for kids, something that my kids could be involved in, that they could understand and be a part of. He's like, why don't you make storybooks for, animated storybooks for kids? I'm like, that's a good idea. So I went and I started making this. I got an Apple computer, got Xcode, learned Objective-C, which was the programming language at that time. Now it's Swift, but Swift wasn't around. Swift's much better than Objective-C. So I started making this little storybook, Jack and the Beanstalk. And Wyatt and Emma, actually everybody, I was getting, all the older kids was kind of getting to little bits and pieces that they could be a part of it. It was great. I loved it. And so at the time we were doing that, so that's like 2010 basically. No, 2009 I'm building this thing. And then 2010 is about when I released it. And in between there, they came out with the iPad. So it was perfect timing. When the iPad came out, we released Jack and the Beanstalk. And just fortunately, through my years of programming, I had learned a lot about, especially doing C++ programming, how not to make something crash. It was really important. There were lots of things that were done in there that were intentional to make sure that this thing could tell a good story, but it also could not fail. So when the iPad came out, like literally the day it came out, I didn't know what was else going to come out on there. So I released mine right about at the time that the iPad was on the iPhone and the iPad. And as I recall it, there was all these these storybook apps, including Disney's that came out, but they kept crashing. And so there was Jack and the Beanstalk that was a reasonable storybook on the iPad, and it didn't crash. And I remember people saying that, in the little comments and stuff like that. And it became the number one book for the iPad for about 3 weeks running, and stayed like in the top 10 for like, I think almost a year or something like that. I don't know exactly, but that brought in a decent amount of income. It helped me to survive for 3 years just on that. And so I was able to do a couple more. And by the way, now you're talking about something. I'm working with this guy, Frank Ayars, who's the artist, and my kids are working with me. I love this. It is just, this is the best of all things. And the one thing that was wrong with it, if I could point one thing that was troubled and kind of led to kind of, well, there was a couple things, because it didn't survive. And it could have, depending on if I had better risk position and stuff. But I've got a lot of kids. I've got to make sure I've got a house, and certain things I don't want to upset too much. But man, working with Frank Rao, me and him are working together. Our minds are working very well, collaborating. He comes up with a picture. I'm like, oh, we should animate that. He's like, oh, we should do this. And it was great. It was awesome. But one of the drawbacks to all this is running a business and not knowing really how to run a business is that I was working like, now I'm working from like, I'm waking up at, sometimes 4 a.m. I'm starting, and I'm working all the way till, because we have Jack and the Beanstalk out running, working well, but now I'm making Cosmo's Day Off, and it's going to be bigger and better. And I really should have, well, there's all kinds of should haves I could talk about, and maybe we could talk about those. But one of the big should haves I should have just taken what I did with Jack and the Beanstalk and reproduced that, just kind of had, and had a better plan for evolving this thing, instead of like really, I put a really big burden on the development cycle of how this thing would work. And I learned a lot in Jack and the Beanstalk of how much I paid to make that, and how much I could have saved on the next one, and did things better. And one of the big should-haves that is a really big one is I can produce things. My fiber is to produce things. That's what I can do, especially in the software world. But what I didn't do, what I didn't know, what's not in my fiber is marketing and paying attention to the kind of the business aspect of this thing. I really didn't care about that. I was like, if I produce these things, they will come, and if I produce them good enough, they will come. And there's some truth in that, but there's definitely, in retrospect, a lot of truth in. There's certain things you have to pay attention to, and like when you put something out there on Apple or Android or wherever, things could be sold. It's like throwing a rock in the ocean. For people to know that your thing is there, no matter how good it is, it's very difficult. So, and going back to this thing becoming number one, and it became number one because it got put in the new and noteworthy by Apple, probably because it was stable and it was halfway decent. And I would say, actually, I have to attribute it to God. If I didn't say that, I would be missing the component of it all. Whether people listening to this believe in that kind of aspect of things, but I didn't realize, in retrospect, I threw all my cards in on this thing. I spent all my money, and the reality is, most apps won't do well. You'll just put it out there, and nobody will know about it at all. I didn't realize I could have lost my house. I could have lost everything. I threw it all in. I even took out a bit of a loan, which was against what I really wanted to do, but I wanted to finish this thing. It was finishing Jack and the Beanstalk required a little bit more money. Took out a little loan, but in retrospect, it was, praise God, that He allowed that to get put in the new and noteworthy, and to have the exposure it did, because there would be no way I could have recouped the money and got a job or whatever I needed to do to kind of fly out of that bad picture. But fortunately, it went to the new noteworthy. It got a lot of exposure. And again, one of the should-haves I should have done, because it had this amazing amount of exposure. I was getting emails from all kinds of people, Penguin Books, all the kind of book companies, hey, can you help us do our app? And non-book companies, a lot of different people with different projects. Can you do this? I had a lot of, funny thing is, I had a lot of people, and I still have a lot of people, but if you become an application developer, like if you tell somebody you build apps for the phone, they're going to say, I have an app. I have an app idea, and they're going to want you to build it. So I have a lot of people still, that will come up and tell me that, and you kind of have to listen to it and understand, but, kind of help them understand that I can't really help you with that unless you can bring certain funding to the table, not because I don't want to collaborate with you or anything, but it's just the economics of things. But I had some really big companies that were wanting, that I really should have leveraged some of that too, and use them even to help me market my thing and made some good. But I was like, no, I'm just going to focus on this, and almost a bit of cockiness that God would help me, do this thing, But He was sending all these things, and that's just retrospect. But I can't say I have regrets. I've just been growing even since that time. So just to give the timeline, there was Jack and the Beanstalk and all those, and Cosmo came out, had some relative, it was much better of an application, but it had much less of a, probably 10% of what Jack and the Beanstalk did, almost exactly. And then I put out some other apps that were real fun and good, but yeah, they just didn't get the exposure. And so it's just kind of, I'm running out of money, and I'm don't know what to do. How do I crack the marketing nut? And I'm gathering a lot of information and ideas, but I'm working a lot longer. I'm putting a lot of stress on the family, which is exactly what I did not want to do. Mm-hmm. And so, I have also a friend, Ralph Brockhaus, who's a real good friend, and he's starting a business. He was out of IBM, and he's like, hey, if your things aren't working out there, you can come over here. I've actually got Monte Carlo Casino. They want me to build an app. I need somebody that can help me build that app. And I'm like, I won't work for a casino. I don't agree with a lot of things that are promoted, especially in Las Vegas and all that. And again, don't mean to offend your podcast base, but that was just my moral stance. And he came back and said, just interesting part of the story, there is no content in this app that will be offensive to you. And he was right. It ended up just being like a little, long story short, I had to drop off what I was doing on the apps, started going to work for him in a company called Smilefish. We built this app for Monte Carlo Casino. They loved it. It did things like just kind of mapped out their casino, where to go, a little concierge like texting app. You could do your bookings through it. So it was a really, from an information business standpoint, it was a cool little app. As far as it being as fun as working on the storybooks and all that, not really the same thing. So it was kind of a bummer, but you got to do what you got to do. And so I did that, and I can stop talking about this, but I got to get to one point of working for some other places, because it came back around. Some things came back around that were really awesome. So I can take a breather, and if you have any questions on that, I can. But I'd love to talk about some of the work that came back later that had some amazing creativity involved in it.
Yeah, no, so much gold mine right there. So much story and so many lessons and all of that. I mean, I guess just one kind of almost like a highlight more than a question. But I love your focus, because this is what drew me, honestly, to programming, maybe even more than my actual love of it, is the fact that you can be at home with your family and be there for them and include them.
Yeah.
And I love how centralized and passionate you are about that and those values going into that. But and I mean, I guess this can be a question. How did that, I mean, you kind of already said that, but how did that kind of shape how you saw all of your work throughout all of the years? I mean, you already said you switched careers a lot, but throughout that kind of center.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have just the way my personality is. I don't look back and say, I wish I would have done this. The only time I think that is certain things that I've done with my kids, like maybe I spoke to them a little too harshly and realized that these words I said, those type of things, I look back and go, those would be good to go back in time and correct and do it the right way. but even that, you look at it and you just go, I've got to get, you fall down, you fail, you get back up, you repent, you say, I shouldn't have done that. And I do, you get better. If you can't do that, then yeah, you've got trouble. But as far as my career is, I look back and I go, no, in fact, I see God in all that. Even typing as a kid, I went to Corona Junior, it wasn't intermediate school at the time, Corona Junior High School, and found myself in a typing class and learned how to type. And I always thought, and when I got into the program, I'm like, God, you prepared me. I know how to type really well. That's, good. So I went through all these different things, and he's been, he's always preparing you for the next thing, it seems, if you're kind of listening. And sometimes you can veer off and stuff. And it's not to say that everywhere you go, God, I don't know, but I really feel like on the whole, God has been there moving things a certain way. And, I don't like the fact that I was away from my family so much. I think ideally if I were to mentor somebody, I would say, hey, try a man. Like, I just think you should be there around your family, if you can. There's police officers and firemen and teachers and things like that where you have to be out in the field. You can't really, but there's ways to bring them in, so in as much as you can bring them in, fortunately, computer programming is one of those things, especially right now, you can bring them in. And a comment I'll say on that is that even though I had to kind of walk away from the storybook apps, and I was just, it was a love from the standpoint of working with my kids and stuff like that. Wyatt worked with me. He's now 24 years old, and Colson to some degree. He was just a little. Wyatt was at the age where he could really enjoy it, and he had the mind for it. Like, he liked it. And Emma also she has a great mind, but she just didn't. She's my oldest, and she just probably didn't enjoy it as much, But I had like Colson and Wyatt working on like the little aspects of the puzzles, and Wyatt even did animations and Adobe After Effects and got really good at that. But Wyatt today, and he kind of leads into that. The next story I was mentioning is that he didn't go down the same programming route I went, but from a technology standpoint, he knows how to program, and he knows how to do graphic design and video editing and all that, and all that kind of started and came out of working like back to Jack and the Beanstalk. So I started working with Plain Joe Studios, now Storyland Studios, and that's a company that Peter McGowan owns. The guy that originally, got me into programming, gave me the good idea for the storybooks, and now I'm working for him because he's kind of got some hands in different businesses. And one of them is this VR business. And I'm doing some VR work. I do that, and I could talk a lot about that. And there's a exhibit even today out at the Museum of the Bible that's a VR experience. They're about to update this with a new experience, but there's this experience where you go through Israel and you see all these amazing features in Israel. And so I got to write the show control system for that under that we did an app too. That was really cool. Something else to talk about. That was a great app because it had some of the creativity that I loved back in the storybooks, because it also takes you through these like little tours, and so it's very interactive and very story driven. And then I start working for this company called under Plain Joe Studios called Ozone, and that was just really awesome. Both of those, the VR company and this, are, as their product, the VR products weren't making enough to support a full-time developer, so they moved me over to this Ozone. And Ozone is a guy from Pixar, 16-year veteran at Pixar, Rich Hurry, starts this company with this guy, Eric Solvey, and who's just an incredible mind, not just an incredible programmer, but incredible at mathematics. And they both have this, they've recognized this issue as they work for Pixar and these different kind of high-end animation companies. So Rich is a rigger, and that's a very specific thing that I probably should, but I probably don't have time to explain all the nuanced details in that. But it's a very specific and incredibly technical task in professional 3D animation development. And then there's Eric Solvey, who's got as many years as Rich Hurry in the whole programmatic aspect of the 3D mathematics. And together they realized that they have a great idea of something. Like Eric knows how to write all these just um, a way to deform a mesh in a very natural and smooth fashion. And if you looked at how animation is done generally in all these different kind of mid-range pipelines, it's kind of this bone and skin. They put a bone and they put these skin on it with some weights, and it has a lot of problems that you have to overcome to make it look natural. You know, if you've ever watched Barbie, not to pick on somebody, but you know, they probably, I don't know their pipeline, but they probably use that. You know, you can see all the animations kind of, you know, a bit unnatural sometimes. And versus like a Pixar, you know, where everything's kind of moving, you know, really. And again, the budgets are a little bit, you know, different, but they took that idea that when you go into a Pixar or you go into high end like Blue Sky or something like that, where they have all these guys and they're paying a lot of money for them to roll their own kind of 3D deformation system that looks natural and works right, hair system and all that. Well, they took this and they made a product called Ozone. So I got to work with them on building help them to build the plugins that would make what this whole mathematics subsystem that does this deformation in a very natural way, to build these plugins that would bring that to people who use like this tool called Unreal Engine and Maya. You know, two of the big players right now out in one is kind of a big player in the animation side of things, and then the other is in the rendering side of things. And so I got to work on that. I loved it. And Wyatt he got brought into that. And he would do like the scripting. He would do a bunch of the pipeline things. We had this company called RFX that was doing a short for a series for Netflix called Super Giant Robot Brothers. And Wyatt even got to they have this thing where when you do all this animation, but there's always mistakes in the animation and you got to QA it and fix it. And the team, he got so good at this and understanding the process that while he's working for us, they used him actually to help in that whole aspect of their business. And all that time, Wyatt's he's seeing all these problems in the headaches that happen in these pipelines, and he loves that whole pipeline development. And sorry if that doesn't make sense to people listening what a pipeline means, but it's basically a complex workflow to get your creative idea into a rendered product. And there's a lot of technical steps in between in all kinds of areas. And there's so many headaches in there. And Wyatt loves that. And so it was cool to see him take the things he had learned. And now we're working together. I love that. That was really great. And now even on the side, me and Wyatt, he's had this vision of building this little software that actually could take and do renders. And again, I probably would have to explain to some people what that really means, but it basically is a way to take a project in the specific product we're targeting, Unreal Engine, and it could take an Unreal Engine project and basically make images out of that, or make a movie, like the visual. And that might sound simple, like why can't it just do it? And it can. But there are a lot of aspects to it because of the lighting and the shadowing and the ray tracing, all the stuff that goes on, and the shaders, and there's a lot that goes on that makes it very difficult for somebody who may not have all the technical understanding to put a machine on their system, all the things that they need. Well, we could do it on the cloud. So getting to work with him on that's a current project we're just having fun with on the side and loving it. And so have that. Got to work with the Ozone team and help them build and bring their things to life. So it kind of came back around. It was a really nice unexpected transition into this creative world again. So it was nice.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and there's so much there and so much more to say and stuff like that. But time's running short here. Yep. So yep. I'm just kind of wrapping things up. I always like to ask this question because I feel like it always gets some good stuff out of it. But what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's listening to this and is like, I'm interested in programming. I want to build things. I want to create things, but I have no idea where to start. It's like, I don't even know where
Yeah.
to begin with it.
Well, yeah, you have so many tools now today. I mean, you have Chat GPT, which you got to be careful of. I mean, sometimes it's going to lie to you about things, but you have the internet, you have YouTube. I mean, those are some. You have like Coursera. You've got universities that offer free courses. You've got Khan Academy, and there's probably many I don't know. I actually don't think somebody could could come and maybe oppose me on this a bit, but I'm convinced in my worldview of things that if you really do want to go down that road, and it is in your fiber, and maybe it's not, but if it is in your fiber, you don't have to go to school. You could go to school and you can probably school will help you to focus and get you connections and get you down a certain, focused path, and maybe even help you skip some steps that maybe you would miss. But you can go on the internet and you can go on YouTube and you can find the thing you want to learn. And the number one thing is to get a project, start working on some project, figure out a project. And what else I would say on that, and I actually want to write a book on this. I've written, I know everybody wants, maybe not everybody, but you always have book ideas, but I do. This is one that I have a list of books I want to write, and this is one of them. I would call it something like Team of Two. And it could be Team of Three, a Team of Four. But you're living in a day right now where you can get 2 people together, 3 people, 4 people. And I know there's Netflix shows. I wish I could get the name. This is outside of software programming, but you can get a film crew together of 6 to 8 guys, and you can you can do a film and put it on Netflix, and it do well. You have the tools, and they don't even have to be near you now because of the like what we're doing right now on over this conference software. But the idea of the team of 2 is that find somebody else, maybe another programmer or somebody else that has a passion for something you want to make. Like if you're a young person, you have a much lower risk position than somebody who's 10 years older than you. If you don't have a family yet, you can take some risks. Some people, maybe that's bad advice for. Maybe they're not the ones to take risks. They're not in that position or that temperament. But for a lot of people, find that project, and maybe it's not a project that will even make you money, but you can find a project, find somebody else, and maybe a couple other people, and work together on that, and make something. And maybe you will make something that actually can make money or make a business out of. But that would provide a good education for you. Not just working with somebody else, but actually just the technical things you have to have, and maybe it's just by yourself, you just get a little side project, but you have to have a project. You have to be working on something and you might have to go through a couple projects to find out what you like. Like maybe it's not writing a banking type application. Maybe it's, graphical programming, or there's so many aspects to programming. Maybe it's, doing something in crypto. Doesn't interest me at all, but a lot of people love that, or blockchain or encryption or security, something like that. So you find that thing you're interested in, or maybe it's not even like. It also could be very much so. It could be that it's not a particular technical thing you like in programming, but it's like maybe you live on a farm and you want to. You want to build. I know this isn't necessarily programming, but it gets into. It's still all the same thing to me, electrical engineering and all that. But you want to build an incubator, for the eggs. Or you want an app you want to build an incubator and you want an app that can tell you when the humidity is at a certain level. Like you could go on Amazon and to a couple of little shops that sell like little humidity sensors or whatever, or even on Amazon, you can get all you need to build that thing, probably for like $100, Raspberry Pi and, some other equipment. You can build that, and then it's going to take you some time, but you can build an app. You can remote in and to any of these devices. But maybe my point is maybe there's something you like. Maybe you're a Disneyland lover or something like that, or a Disney lover, or you have some, you're a fan of something. It's like build an app towards that. Maybe a certain animal you like dogs. Build an animal that connects people on dog walking or something like that. But build a project. And then use the resources that are heavily available on the internet, and you'll get to where you want to go. You'll find that spot.
Yeah. No, great stuff. Appreciate you taking the time to come on and stuff like that. It was
Yep.
really, really amazing story and everything. So
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, I guess that kind of wraps everything up. Thanks everyone for listening, and that is the end of the show. So goodbye.